Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Cesar Hernandez, and I'm more than happy to be in this session. I am a senior software engineer at Tomitribe, also a Java champion and Apache member. I am committer and contributor also in the Java ecosystem around many other open source projects. I am part of the Guatemala Java user group and also the Guatemala Oracle user group, and I follow a lot of people that I know is being part of this great conference. I like to also share and learn from you and from both sides of technology and also music, which is my all-time hobby. So I want to ramp up with this session with the following slide, right? It shows what most of us may face sometimes, because security in Java, as well as with any other application and open source dependencies, can be overwhelming from time to time. It depends on your organization size. Each of these stakeholders that you're seeing under the water in that slide may have a whole team built to tackle each individual item, or maybe you are a small team who needs some kind of tips and tricks to navigate this. And now with the raising of AI agents everywhere into the mix, keeping everyone in sync, it becomes a new level of challenge. To set the context, over the past couple of years, I have been tracking reports related to the Java ecosystem sources like Sonatype, Verizon, IBM, Microsoft, and combining with what we see firsthand at Tomitribe, the numbers have been changed drastically. The annual open source download has been growing more than 9 trillion times across Maven, NPM, any other repository that you may be using for your dependencies. So when we are talking about what is the attack surface that we now and they have for security, well, this is our surface that we are gonna working on. In reports like the open source Sonatype, they found that almost 5,000 new malicious packages just went in the report in the 2025 edition, and their exact word for it is that now this is being handled in an industrialized way. So they are not lone developers pushing bad code, but they're actually organized groups with the schedules and tooling and running like a formal business will do all these kind of threats. The accumulative total just crossed 1.2 million of locked packages, so which it has been increasing a lot. And this year, for the first time, that number includes Hugging Face, because these platforms are now being targeted by threat actors who are seeking new and hard to detect ways for inserting and distributing malicious software to unsuspecting hosts. So if you thought machine learning models were somehow separated from this context, well, they are not. This last one from Verizon, and I want you to really think about it. 30% of all breaches now go throughout a third party. That means that in 2024, it was 50%, so it doubled from year to year. And as the saying goes, your firewall won't protect you from your dependencies. And yes, you can put a price tag on all of this, because from organization, from company to company, the impact actually is reflected in numbers, and this impact is very real. So is people looking for someone to blame, or how I call it, what is the elephant in the room, right? Well, let's analyze the trend from the past 3 years. And the stats show that almost half of AI-generated code has some sort of vulnerabilities, if not properly configured. So that is just the starting point, right? But when when things get interesting and a little scary, is that around 75 to 80% of developers actually believe that AI code is more secure than the one they generate by themselves. So think about that for a second. The tools that can introduce vulnerabilities is the one that everyone throws the most, right? So that's not just ironic. That's a problem that it keeps growing every day if not addressed properly. And it gets even better. Let's look at this. 80% of developers apply the same level of scrutiny to a dependency suggested by an AI assistant, as the one they pick it up manually, or the one they used to pick it up manually, and which in practice means none. So here we go again. You trust AI and you skip the check, and the vulnerabilities goes right straight from the packages you are maybe using. Now, from JFrog, really got me in its report is that the percentage of organization scanning at both code, source code, and binary level went down from around 50% to 43%, 56%. But even with the toolings we have now, the fact that it's decreasing, even though we are moving faster and greater with AI, we are scanning less. So this seems like the wrong direction, right? And don't get me wrong, it's not AI to blame. It's how we are embracing it and how we are using it that sometimes can jeopardize the security of our Java system enterprise applications. So for everyone here building Java applications, the challenge now is how to scale AI, how to scale your team, your process, your infrastructure, your software supply chain to avoid these issues that we have been seeing so far. Dropping Maven dependencies in your POM, for example, without double checking the open source index is just a starting point, right? Are we double checking that our dependencies or the transitive dependencies of our applications are being properly cherry picked and selected? So that checks doesn't happen automatically. Even when you are using AI tools, you need to feed the prompt and feed the tooling and all the infrastructure around to actually be aware of this. Then, since 2020, I always get this kind of feedback that no one's agree what DevSecOps actually means. So we just need to remind where the baselines are to embrace the latest changes in tech with more security in mind, right? I was having a prediction, I recall maybe 3 years ago, that if everything started with DevOps, then the security was placed in the middle, and I was kind of arguing at some point a couple of years back that what was the next hype term that was going to be part of this, and it's AI. So spoiler alert, you will see that in the next content. So we need to remember that DevSecOps is the result of good and mature DevOps practices in all your software delivery process, right? That's has been written in stone. With more than a decade ago, DevOps highlighted integrations per day, deployments per day. Then DevSecOps preaches that the security patches can be applied even per day, with the objective of business cost to be optimized, right? So we need to remember that everyone is responsible for the security. That includes your AI models, agents, infrastructure, and everything that is around them. And I know sometimes there is the tendency to give it for granted, mainly because how fast AI has been evolving. But I share the feeling that we are in an adolescence of the AI security adoption for some parts of our entire Java lifecycle and software process as a whole. With the latest changes in software security chain, the open source ecosystem, you can think that is the foundation of modern software, because it is, and the DevSecOps or AI DevSecOps, as we call it now, give us the operational framework to do this at scale and with the same pace as AI is moving us within the process. So even if we have been preaching the best practices of DevSecOps for the past 10 years, 5 years, currently what has changed is the stakes. So think of this. The adversary position and the quality of defense available to us is evolving really fast. The CVE dilemma has also shifted a bit, and let me explain why. Remember that the mission of the CVE program is to identify, define, and catalog public disclosure security vulnerabilities, right? And each CVE, has severity associated. It follows a workflow like the one you're seeing here. And it's a general process that every CVE should follow, but we know that sometimes that's not the case. Even if we start adopting AI agents to replace most of the tasks, the reality is that open source, at least yesterday I checked, is still being driven by humans that make usage of AI to speed and improve their workflows, for sure. But also, here is a real-world example with the process of the CVE.org that it almost went offline last year. Not because of a security breach, but it almost went offline because of a paper funding issue. So this showed that it's not only the tooling, but also there is still humans that needs to sign a paper in order to keep, in this case, the CVE database up to date and up and running. The vulnerability databases has also been taking advantage of embracing AI, but it's been a process that, it gets time to be in sync to all the databases, and the AI at the end rely on this source of CVE listing to actually recommend you, and the Java ecosystem obviously is part of all this process. But it's important to remember that the overall process remains the same, with more speed and tools than ever. But when an end of life hits you, not even the database can provide you the information you need. So we usually are using Java components or components that have transitive dependencies, that when those dependencies goes to the end of life cycle, you may be asking questions to the AI like, okay, if there is a new version, it will reply no. Can I backport that? The AI will say yes, but then you need to come up to grab part of your team to actually start patching an end-of-life software that you, for X or Y reason, can update, and you ended up, deviating the objective of your development of your solution into actually start maintaining an end-of-life open source product. So another common question we got is how we prioritize all of this, and how we know that a particular X or Y CVE is being actually active, being exploited. So you have examples like this CASA catalog, which can help you to know how popular is that particular CVE that comes from the 100 lists that you may get daily from your proactive scanning and tooling. And it helps to reply this kind of question. How can I prioritize which CVE do I need to address first in my Java ecosystem and my infrastructure? This lands into the next question. How can I contribute to the Java CVE ecosystem? And for this, we need to clarify the governance of open source, right? Who is in charge? And some people still believe that there is one mighty, the only one responsible for any change in the open source and the one to blame why that particular dependency went end of life. But in reality, you are part of that governance. You are part of the decision maker, either because you are a user, a maintainer, a developer, or a business stakeholder that decided to support the usage of that particular open source component. Another question I get is, how can I contribute if the governance is based on my decisions? Do I need to allocate resources or even agents, tokens to support these almighty developers? And the key part here is that everything is based on a community. So in the community, you can rely on, is the community the one you can actually just knock the door and say, how can I help? And from there, you can start evolving and actively contributing to the open source project. At Tomitribe, we help our customers with open source maintenance. That's what we do. We provide end-of-life support for open source software like ActiveMQ, Apache Tomi, and Apache Tomcat. And over the years, we have found common patterns that help organizations to improve their open source responsible usage, as I like to call it, and to contribute not just effectively, but also in a secure manner. We have this open source lifecycle survival guide that start first for acknowledging that open source is powerful. Yes, it's free. We have been knowing this for decades, but also that it comes with zero warranty, right? That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It is what it is. And that part hasn't changed no matter how much AI tooling you add on top of your infrastructure. Remember, when something breaks and your customer data is on the risks to be exposed, the legal responsibility still lands entirely on your company, your organization. So no AI engines will fix this clause in the license of open source. Again, be proactive in the ecosystem you depend. That means, for example, founding contributor, even just acknowledging the people behind the project that you are using that particular dependency. Tomitribe, for example, this is literally what we do every day. And we provide not just the current branches, but also the end-of-life version of many of these softwares, like I mentioned, Tomi, ActiveMQ, and Tomcat, to give you an example. So we see firsthand what happens to companies that doesn't have this all in mind and clearing their process, right, to effectively secure the usage of their open source. Another resource that we have is the open source security process and policies that each of the components that you're using may have. For example, here we are seeing at the Apache Software Foundation and Eclipse Foundation security policies. Also, you have the reference for the Adoptium project. So make sure to take a look at those ones if you are using components from those organizations. Because it will clear out for you many questions that you may have related with security. And then, I'm not a lawyer, but I can recommend you to go at this and check out on these resources, because also we have the open source AI guidelines. And since this is the elephant in the room, the open source also has this type of guidelines. And it worked also, again, for your developer team, for your agents to go there and analyze that before opening a PR, if you want to be part of this ecosystem and start actively contribute. Then, once we move from identifying the fine-grained Java security that is needed, we need to zoom out a bit also and look the big picture. This takes us to the supply chain security. And again, we need to embrace the software supply chain, and we need to recognize that it involves all the tooling and process used for building our systems. So that definitely AI is part of this. And do you remember the software bill of materials? Well, the BOM is not best practice anymore. The software bill of materials is the law in several places now. In EU, for example, it was applied, is now a requirement since 2024 for software related with critical infrastructure. So if your Java application interacts with energy, finance, health, transport in Europe, this is not optional, right? You need an SBOM to be part of your life cycle development process. And the concept just got bigger. We now have the AI bill of material that it's basically the same idea, but for your machine learning models. Also, it includes things like the data that it was used for training and your AI components. If your Java application interacts with machine learning models in 2026 and you don't know where that model came from or what it was trained on, well, there is a gap that you need to address. I will close with 5 things you can actionate and improve in this quarter. Independently, if you are really new to these concepts, or you are in the process of implementing them, or you already implemented and want to take a brief moment to review it. One of the first one is to generate the SBOMs and plan your AI bombs right now, your artificial intelligence bills of materials. Secure also, since the first character that you type in your IDE or your team types. That means nowadays we have plenty of toolings like GitHub Copilot, AutoFix, and other vendors keep improving their existing integration with the IDEs, the ones that talk with Java and with all other technologies. They definitely have something already in place for you to start the security of your software in your systems. Next, applied policy coding to your AI tooling. Also apply zero trust on your AI agents. And lastly, but really important, be proactive in the open source ecosystem you depend on. This can range from, again, founding contribution and acknowledging that open source is an ecosystem. And it's not someone else's responsibility, it's our responsibility to keep it safe. If you make it so far to this session, I want to thank you. And remember that the security is still everyone's responsibility. And in 2026, that includes every AI tool that you are using to build and create the software to deliver your services. So feel free to drop your comment, questions, and feedback, and see you on the next one.